Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Josh Neuroth, head of product with Ankr. In April 2021, Josh left his 7-year career in the data center and digital infrastructure provider space to join Ankr, which has a mission of making crypto and Web3 adoption easy. Josh recently tweeted, "Just like how every company is already a tech company, someday every company will be a Web3 company as well." Josh, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Well, I'm honored to be here, guys, and excited for this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on as well. And Web3 is just such an interesting term that has come around, and we're going to dive deep into that through this conversation. But before we do that, I'd love to hit the starting point of when were you first introduced to crypto? What did that look like, and what was your initial impression?
Yeah, so everyone laughs at me when I tell them the story, but my first touch point with crypto was when I had a friend mining Bitcoin in 2009, and he was pumping out Bitcoins all day long, buying gaming PCs, reinvesting that, selling the Bitcoin to buy more gaming PCs so he could mine more. And his wife eventually made him stop, and he was like, "Man, you got to put $100 in this." I never did, and I just kept going, watching it go up, and I was like, "This is a fad," and then started to see kind of around the time, we, like many people in that mid 2017, really started to see like the prices going up, people getting excited about it, and that's when it kind of caught my attention. But Web3 wasn't really a thing at that point. Ethereum, was only about 2 years old at that point, and so I started getting into the space at that time, but really didn't get heavily into the space, I'd say, into 2019.
And Wade mentioned in the bio, you left a 7-year career to start a Web3 startup. Can you walk us through? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so I'm not a co-founder of Ankr, but I did meet the team really early on when it was less than 10 people, and at the time was doing a lot in my career. I worked primarily in infrastructure as a service. And when I most recently worked for Sixtera, which just IPO'd. So I left to join Ankr 3 months before the IPO. And some of my friends were like, "Wow, are you crazy?" And I was like, "Well, this thing is going." And that was back in early 2021 of this past year. And what's been so fascinating about this is at the time, Ankr has been talking about Web3 infrastructure and just the Web3 movement for a couple of years now. It's like only your technologists really knew about Web3 a year ago. I tweeted it. I remember the first tweet I did, and I tagged Web3, and people are like, "What?" And people are like, "You're talking about the semantic web." That was kind of a term that people used to say for Web3 before it was like the crypto movement. And now what's so profound about it is that it's not just the next evolution of the web, it's turning into a cultural movement. And that is really the most significant thing that I've seen here.
It's interesting. Like you mentioned Twitter there, and I love I was going down your Twitter profile, I guess, and different tweets, and you're really good at providing metaphors. There's a lot of really good metaphors there. One of the ones you tweeted recently, you said, "If crypto is a digital gold rush, Ankr is providing the shovels and the pickaxes." Yep. So can you dive deeper into like what is Ankr for maybe our audience members who haven't heard of it?
Yeah. So essentially, we're basically building a decentralized platform or decentralized web services that kind of power the Web3 DeFi metaverse movement. And the way that we do that, there's kind of two ways. So I'm going to dive a little bit into the technology. I love explaining this. And again, like you said, using those metaphors, but blockchain is in itself a decentralized system. And it's the blockchain itself is basically nodes, which are applications that run on a physical computer server in someone's house or a data center somewhere, right? And so, that's great. We have there's hundreds of thousands of nodes that exist in the system, but to really like do any kind of thing interesting, you need access to nodes. And there's a whole bunch of services that we're building that kind of live on those nodes. And we're building a protocol that kind of lives there. So let me give you a couple of use cases of how this is. So in a blockchain, especially in proof of stake, you have effectively two types of nodes. You have what's called a full node. That is a node that kind of receives the transactions from the network, where you can read transactions from it. So all use cases in crypto need access to a full node. Like, for example, Coinbase or Binance run thousands of nodes that they're using to power their infrastructure. For building any kind of analytics app, wallet app, whatever it is. If you want to talk or read information from the blockchain, there's a node behind there, accessing that. And then on the other side of it, you have the validators, which is what I think most people are familiar with, the concept of validators if they've read up on technology. Validators create the next block on the blockchain. So I like to say it like that the blockchain itself is, even though it's like this distributed system, it's basically a database that lives everywhere. And that database kind of looks like a stack of Lego bricks that start from the ground, and then it just keeps growing into the sky, one by one. And those validators are adding the blocks, to the blockchain. So we've started building a number of services that live on both the full nodes and the validators. And essentially our mission is to make, mass adoption easy. And so, some of those services are used by projects like Trust Wallet. DeFi Pulse is one of our customers on that. And then on the staking platform, we have about 600 million of US dollars worth of crypto assets that are locked on our validators. We run over 2,000 validators now. And so, yeah, it's an exciting time. I think what's fascinating about this, one of the reasons I wanted to come over to Ankr is because it's kind of the most fundamental use case there is. Like, all applications that are being built in the Web3 really need access to these core services, right? And, some people ask me, is this like, are you building the next AWS? Some of our competitors use that language, and I say no. And the reason is because in number one, we're building a protocol that's effectively going to be community owned, not a big centralized entity. And number two is that in this kind of new world, your traditional like computer cloud infrastructure, if you will, is almost like embedded. The money is the money is embedded in the infrastructure. We've never seen that before. Traditionally, regular infrastructure and banking infrastructure are completely separate, and these are tied together, right? And so, that there's a lot there, but yeah.
Well, there is a lot there, and I think some of what you were just talking about had to do with Web3, and that being part of the conversation today. We've seen on some other podcasts you've been on, you've done a great job explaining the evolution of Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3. Mm-hmm. And I'd love, not to kind of repeat what's already been said, but for the sake of our audience, if you could maybe do that explainer here, it'd be great to, hear the evolution.
Yeah. Well, Web 1, essentially people were launching websites, and you'd find those websites through your web browser. There's kind of a read-only mode for the web. I would think about the years like the 90s to the early 2000s, Alta Vista, GeoCities, Yahoo, even AOL. I remember going and just like in the late 90s, early 2000s, doing so much research, but you weren't really talking to people online unless you were using like AOL, which, was their chat service. But you were looking up information. Then Web 2, I would say, really kicked off with the the blogging, like Zynga. I don't know if you guys remember that. Then you had MySpace, Facebook, YouTube, eventually Twitter, where there was this rich media content you could upload, you could talk to other people, and that the whole social media revolution, really is like what Web 2 is. And I think, what's been interesting about kind of where the internet has been. So I'll tell you like what Web3 is, and I want to talk about a little bit about like why Web3 matters. But Web3 is effectively, I wouldn't say it's a replacement for Web1 or Web2. It really is a system, the next evolution that kind of runs in parallel to Web2. And the thing about Web3 is, if you think about Web1 as read only, Web2 is read and write. And then Web3 is read, write, and own. The ownership piece is the key piece in Web3. You see that with NFTs, with crypto, with governance tokens, with DAOs. People are really incentivized. They have a stake, literally a stake in the game.
Yeah, such a good point. And going down that kind of Web3 line of thinking, I mean, 2021, like you mentioned there, that wasn't really a term that we talked about too much before, like early 2021. Has the explosion of growth, when we start to talk about things like NFTs, has that surprised you at the rate it's grown, especially in the last year?
NFTs, I wasn't expecting them to grow this fast. I think a lot of people say, 2021 was like the JPEG summer. But that's like really just the art is just the first use case or the first implementation of what NFTs can be. And I think, that has accelerated a lot faster than I thought it would. And I never really expected this fast for Web3 to become, a cultural movement where we have, Eminem buying an NFT or, some NFL player, right? And tweeting about it or putting their name.eth on their jersey or whatever it is. So that's been crazy. I never expected to see, we've talked for a long time about like the crypto community has talked for a long time about like, oh, when's mass adoption going to happen? And it's like, it's already happening. It's already here.
So going back to the follow-up, to that last question, you mentioned you were going to explain Web 1, 2, and 3, but you said you wanted to also touch on the importance of Web 3. So maybe I'll throw that back at you.
Yeah, well, I think and there's a lot of great content already around, centralized platforms. And I don't think so centralized platforms are inherently bad. We use them every day. We rely on them every day. Like if you buy a flight on an airline, you hope it's centralized, right? Like there's a lot. Centralized platforms can be good, but I think specifically in technology platforms, centralized platforms have really abused their power. And the de facto business model. There's really two business models in Web 2. One is your subscription-based business model, which is what Netflix or AWS use, or, we're all familiar with, Instacart or Amazon Prime, all these subscription services. And then everything else is effectively an advertise-based business model that extracts user data. It comes at the expense of the user. And so these platforms like, the big social network giants have gotten so good at extracting our data for optimizing for advertisements that it's kind of ruined the user experience. And, it's kind of hurt that initial ethos of the democratized web, of that Web 1 ethos. So I think Web 3 matters is it really seeks not to just build decentralization for the sake of decentralization, but it really seeks to, I would say Web 3 is actually a tool to coordinate massive amounts of people. And it's okay if there's some centralized systems in there, but effectively it's getting the community engaged and really decentralizing power, not always the systems. It is a decentralized system, but that's really what it's about. And it happens by giving, those users a stake, whether it's an NFT or a crypto asset.
You were recently writing an article about, or said you were going to write an article about why people should get onto Web3 in 2022. Why do you think it's important?
Well, I think we're in many reasons. So specifically in technology, if you look at like, I don't know, I live here in Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area, most of my friends that are working for Web2 big tech companies that are a couple years into their career are, you know, very well off financially, right? They've reaped the benefits that all this data extraction has kind of generated, and these power of these tech communities. And I think what's great about Web3 is that people from all over the world are building in Web3, are getting involved, and there is not really like there's not like one city you have to be in. You can be anywhere in the world and be a part of that. And so the barrier to entry is very low. You don't need to move to New York City. You don't need to move to Shanghai or London or San Francisco or wherever to be involved in this. You can literally go to Discord, join a DAO, start helping out, and literally make your income doing that. And so that is like, and we're also simultaneously, I really believe that all the technology that's being created now will really be powering kind of this concept of the fourth industrial revolution. And that really means that there's a lot of wealth being created right now. So it's the right time. It's very low risk to join Web3 right now because it's not the sketchy like new industry. It's gaining real traction as it's become a cultural movement.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to basics here. What does Web3 mean from the user standpoint? Because like to say to join Web3, like I think it's much easier for a person to understand when they're working in Web3, they're working on a project that's a Web3 project. But for the user, like at what point are you in Web3? Is it Web3 if you're using, if you're connecting your wallet, like at what point are you in a Web3 ecosystem?
Sure. It's hard to say. I think people define it differently. I'd say like what I would consider someone that's in the Web3 is they're using a browser based or they basically own their crypto. They have a standalone wallet like MetaMask or Coinbase standalone wallet. They've moved crypto assets maybe off an exchange into this like they own their crypto. There's no central gatekeeper in there. And then they're doing something, in the community effectively. And so, not everyone obviously is going to know how to, program or whatever. I just saw, I'm planning to attend the ETH Denver conference here in late February. And they're literally like, you can volunteer at the event and just like be a host or a door usher. And literally you earn crypto for doing that. It's really cool. Right. And so they airdrop it to you. You sign up, you put your wallet address in, and then after that, you get airdropped some of their tokens. And so, that is to me an example of someone that the average person could find a local community and get involved in some movement or some, event and potentially earn some crypto assets from that.
One of the downsides or challenges of being early is that, so for yourself, for myself, for Ulf, we understand what that means, like have MetaMask, connect it, when we first get MetaMask, write down that seed phrase, never lose it, never tell anybody, like all that kind of thing. But that is an intimidating step one of the process to go through. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, is that something that's continually going to get easier? And in your opinion, is there too much friction right now that mass adoption, until it gets a bit easier, we'll really see that mass adoption?
Yeah, it is very intimidating. It was also me as like a, technologist was intimidating for me as well. And so there are solutions being built right now that address those scary moments. I was just using and exploring, there's Near Protocol, their wallet. They have, they allow you to sign up with your email. It's not as secure, obviously, as if you generate your seed phase and store that, but they're helping solve that. So long term, the solutions will get better and better. we're still kind of early in the technology itself. And so there's a lot of like open source development work that needs to be done to improve, I think, the chains themselves to kind of enable this. But as they do that, it's just going to speed up adoption, right? And so I think one strategy I would recommend, to anyone that's feels a little daunted or uncomfortable with using, a wallet like that, is to just take something like maybe $50 worth, $100 worth, if you have that to spare, and just say, I'm going to create a new wallet. I'm going to put this in there, and I'm just going to experiment and get comfortable. And it's okay if this goes away. It's like the cost of a course or something, like, and just start there. And then you'll learn what to do, what not to do, how it works. And then you can make the decision, do you want to put more assets or get more involved in this? So it's really just taking that jump. I had a friend who made himself a to-do list. He's like, I'm going to start with buying crypto. I'm going to start with moving it to a wallet. Then I'm going to, buy an NFT. And he kind of went down this list and he just did all these things. And then he's like trying to work in this full time and, doing everything. So including like minting NFTs and being part of communities and whatnot. But it starts with just taking that step.
Ulf, do you realize our audience has been either watching or listening to this episode for 20 minutes?
20 minutes? No, they should probably subscribe.
Yeah, they should subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment and turn on notifications. And if you're listening to this podcast, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and a review.
We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. So go check out the episode description. You can find all that information below. And we have an update on the NFT, don't we?
That's right. We didn't previously mention this, but this NFT for OG supporter is a one of one. There will only be one of this kind ever minted, and we have a few surprises for the person who purchases it. The link is in the episode description.
And back to the episode. So to dig into Ankr a little more, staking is a big part of what Ankr provides. Can you just break down, simplify, what is staking? How does it work on Ankr? Why would I go stake with Ankr? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So simply put, staking, just think of it as passive earning or earning effectively. It's not really interest, but you're earning crypto assets for effectively holding your crypto or not selling it. So, staking is really, really taking off. And what we do at Ankr is we make it very easy to stake assets. So like an example is with Ethereum, where to stake on Ethereum natively, if you just operate your own node, for example, I talked about this earlier about how we're making like the node experience easier. If you need 32 Ethereum, which at today's price is really high, Ankr, we make that easier with a minimum deposit of 0.5 ETH, which is about $2,000 currently. And so it lowers that barrier. We do that through micro pools. We kind of pull the Ethereum together as we stake it. So, that's an example. And then Ethereum currently is paying a little bit north of 6% APR. And so what's nice about that, if you stake, is you're not only getting 6% more assets over the course of a year, you're also getting whatever price appreciation, is in that just by holding it, right? And so what I do want to say about staking is that when you stake with Ankr, we don't take possession of your crypto. So, I can get into the technology if you want to go into that, but effectively we support, those wallets like MetaMask or a few others, Trust Wallet, where the user owns their crypto, they're just locking it up, and they're taking place and they're really honestly helping the network itself, helping Ethereum or whatever other chain they're staking on when they do that.
So is that, because on the website, there was something about, and apologies for my lack of technical expertise here, but like AETH and the liquid assets that you receive. Do you mind just diving a little bit deeper into how that does work?
Yeah. So the average staker, the average asset holder probably doesn't care that much about what we call synthetic tokens. So what it does is we effectively give the people that stake with us, we give them a voucher called AETH, and there's two different versions of it. And it represents the value of your staked deposit. And then you can go use that effectively that same value in DeFi. You can join a liquidity pool, you can, sell it, whatever you want to do. But it basically like unlocks your deposit while it's being staked, right? Because we effectively it's not really the right word, but we've effectively kind of collateralized your deposit there. So we see that, primarily be used by whales and large asset holders that, they have a significant amount of capital kind of locked up and they want that liquidity.
And are there any risks that come with staking on Ankr?
No. And the reason is because, like I said, we have, well, the only risk is if you lose your seed phase, right? Like that's pretty much
fair,
just like all crypto, right? Because we're not what's called non-custodial. We don't take custody of your assets. So your crypto, you are control of it. You're just locking it for that period of time. And then, you will unlock it at, the other side of that. And then, we have insurance deposits and other things that are playing into the architecture of the network, in case anything were to happen, but, very unlikely.
Switching gears a little bit, we recently had an interview with Michael Kong of Phantom,
yep.
And we kind of dove into the discussion around advertising and that side of things. And what we were talking about a little bit was, you think about something like crypto.com becoming, like with UFC, one of their main sponsors and taking over the previous, what was known as Staples Center to crypto.com Arena and just like massive advertising, that kind of thing. I know Phantom had got into it with Formula One. Ankr is it Sacramento Kings that there's some sponsorship going on there. So I guess the question is like, why basketball? I guess like why that particular market and what's the real benefit? Is it just about general consumer brand awareness kind of thing, or like what's the benefit of going down that sponsorship route?
Yeah, for sure. So the Sacramento Kings in particular, I think are one of the most technology progressive teams in the whole country. They have a data center, for example, in their stadium. Their owner is a huge supporter of crypto. And so, it made a lot of sense for us. I think it's something, we were actually the first crypto company to announce any partnerships with a professional basketball. And then I think 4 days later, Coinbase announced theirs. And now you have like crypto.com and several others like FTX. And, it goes down, lots of adoption there. So we're, for the Sacramento Kings, it's only about 2-hour drive from the Bay Area. We can go to games. We can take our team there. We can take partners there. It's great. And it is a kind of a little bit of an extension of kind of our home base out there. And so every court game, our logo is on the court, which means it's broadcast nationally everywhere, whether the NBA is broadcast, so those home games are. So there's a lot of exposure to our logo. And I think it's something like it's important for, crypto companies. There's so many crypto companies that are completely anonymous, right? Like you don't really know who it's working with. It's kind of putting a stake in the ground and saying, hey, this is us. This is what we're here to do. We're here to be, blockchain's foundation. We're making this protocol, come learn about this. And so we see it as a way to bring in, people into the ecosystem. And that's effectively what is happening. Our social media has grown quite fast since we did that partnership. We've seen a lot of people joining our social media, Reddit channel, our Discord, talking about that. And we have a lot more to do with the Kings, so we're excited for that.
Cool. Again, switching gears. One thing that you mentioned before is that Web3 will disrupt SaaS. I run a SaaS marketing company, so I'm particularly interested in how you see that playing out and how you think Web3 will disrupt that industry.
Yeah. So first, I would SaaS is software as a service. So you use SaaS is I think most commonly used in the business world. But also, there's many consumer grade applications as well. So I think what's interesting about Web3 in particular is it's not real. Like when I talk about a wallet, someday we won't even say a wallet. Like it's just going to be your ID, really. And your digital identity is going to be your wallet. And so a lot of what's happened with SaaS, software as a service, is getting, users onto the platform and then having a subscription revenue. You build some features, some integration, some user experience feature that niche or that company or that vertical really cares about. You make it easy for them to do some job, right? And I think what's going to happen is you kind of have several movements coming together. Like if people just can connect their wallet and all their data is there, that's going to be very disruptive eventually for the business community, right? Like as wallet technology gets better, imagine, having team wallets where, a whole company has like a wallet and all their individual employees are on there. They're signing in. I think, we don't have one example is Auth0. Auth0 just is exploring, a Web3 sign in with wallet. Right now, they have a single sign-on product that's heavily used in the enterprise environment. And so eventually, I think that's the way to go. We're several years away from even really seeing that happen. But also you have the front end technologies that build kind of the user experience are getting easier to build that. So those two things together can be very powerful to disrupt SaaS long term. But long term, I don't think we'll disrupt Salesforce or companies like that. I think it's more of the long tail of SaaS providers that will get disrupted.
It's interesting to think. I mean, some of the examples you just mentioned were, primarily to do with logging in and how your wallet is your user ID, and you use that to log in now. And if it's single sign-on, you're doing it in multiple different websites and applications. But from the business side, it could go beyond that, and I mean, maybe it will disrupt the business model itself. As well.
Let me give you a couple examples of how this works. So right now it's laughable to think about, like a Ethereum wallet disrupting SaaS because of the high gas fees. But as gas fees will eventually approach zero, and what that means is that all data that needs to be open and out there will just be written to the blockchain. Right. And you're already seeing some enterprise adoption of Solana because they're really fast network and they have, low gas fees. And so think about a company, their whole supply chain is in their wallet, right? Their whole inventory is in their wallet, right? And that, they can just sign into a front end application. All that data is available. You don't have to lock it up in some software as a service database somewhere and create an API integration. I think, this is all speculation. I don't have any practical examples of this, but that's where we're headed.
Yeah, that's a super interesting, speculative future, to just have all of the information for your business right there in your wallet, and you go connect it to the provider, and now you plug and play with whatever services that provider, gives you.
Yeah. And that's why I think Ankr is really early. We've seen just the traffic on our network, supporting customers. It's at least 20x right now from 9 months ago.
Wow.
And we think we're just super early still. We're still in the infancy stage of all this. So, there's a lot of work cut out for us.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or opinions on, so crypto in the past has gone through different cycles, and it seems to historically have kind of gone through these 4-year cycles of bull markets and bear markets. Right now, who knows? There's the super cycle theories. There's all sorts of thoughts on what we could be in right now. However, when we are in those bear markets, it's a really interesting time because the people who are, believers, they're there and they're building, but in terms of the average person talking about these things, it's much quieter than when prices are going up and that side of things. So I guess, in terms of Web3 and everything, do you think that there's a potential if we did, let's say we had this euphoric rise up and then a big crash and several year bear market, could you see that really stalling adoption, and maybe it would be several years before, we're talking about some of the things that actually seem pretty close right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, this is kind of a dangerous thing to say, but I don't think there was going to be really any huge bear markets unless unless potentially there's like a huge financial crisis, like global financial crisis. So I think what's different, like the space is completely different than the last 4 years right now. And there's several things that have happened. So I think first you have institutional money coming in. That creates kind of like a floor where, they're not going to sell at a loss because they're sometimes public companies or, institutional investors. Second of all, what's also interesting is like, the last 4 years has been kind of defined as a lot of people speculating on roadmaps, right? And right now you have actual execution and projects have cash flow. So what I see happening now is like every time the market dips, projects in the space are investing their cash flow in buying up assets. And so it's a little bit different because it's not that like, I don't know, kind of what happened with GameStop at the beginning of this year, where it's like, are you going to go? Are you going to sell? It's not really that anymore. And I think you'll see a lot, those highs and lows will kind of start evening out like a traditional market.
And talking to the future more, what's the future look like for Ankr and where will it be going? Like, what are some of the plans on the roadmap?
Yeah. Well, for us, we were at the beginning of 2021, we were frankly a small team right around the time I joined, a little bit north of, 30, 35 people. Now we're about 100. We're definitely hiring a lot, really working on our user experience, our product reliability. There's so much work to be doing. We have several new products launching this year, some new opportunities, some new announcements that are coming down. But I think, to go back to what I said earlier about some of the issues in Web3 and DeFi, like we're very focused, like I said earlier, on making that mass adoption happen. So that's going to mean like investing in user experience, customer experience, really ironing out that so that, every person can feel comfortable with working with, Web3. And so we have a lot of plans for that this year. Our first product is launching at the beginning of February, which is exciting for this year. And then we have a very aggressive roadmap the rest of the year as well. So, I think, one of the things long term that is most exciting, and this will, we could talk all day about this, but as we've integrated 50 different chains, which is the most of any infrastructure provider. We're pretty much focused on about 15 that are kind of like the ones that have the most traction right now. And then, like I said earlier, we run both the full nodes and validators. And so what's fascinating is like Ankr is kind of like, it's not sexy to say this, but we're increasingly becoming a middleware to all these blockchains. And I would say, a lot of people talk about Ethereum as a layer 1, Polygon's a layer 2, and there's all these layers. They're all trying to solve some of the core issues in the space. But, historically, we've seen this in Web 2. It's like the middleware companies end up solving a lot of the issues, right? Between different protocols. So, for example, Ethereum is high gas fees and it's rather slow at like 20 transactions per second right now. So a lot of people are speculating on Solana, right? And Solana is doing great. They're building a great ecosystem. But like, if you have assets in Ethereum, you can't really move them easily to Solana. They're completely different. If you're launching an NFT collection, you're like, do I do it on Solana? Do I do it on Ethereum? Long term, Ankr just makes that seamless. You don't even need to worry about it. We're like a layer 0 that kind of connects everything together and makes everything interconnected. And so that is the future we're working towards.
You're just talking about Ankr's future specifically. I'm curious. I always like to have our guests kind of like crystal ball a little bit. And for you with Web3, like in 2022, we mentioned, this is the year for people to start exploring if they haven't experimented a little bit. But where do you think things could be going this year, especially considering 2021 was such a rapid year of growth?
Yeah, it's I think two big things that there's a lot of excitement around are gaming. Every major game studio has a Web3 strategy right now, and I think we'll go from like we've seen these like pay as you go apps or games on the Apple App Store and Android App Store, and eventually they're going to be like you play to earn crypto. And that's going to be really exciting. You play to earn NFTs, you play to earn like tokens and that have real value. So that's exciting. And then social, specifically around DAOs, decentralized autonomous organization. I think the next, I recently talked about this also on another social network I'm on, but what I don't think we'll see like a true Web3 replacement for Facebook. In fact, what we'll probably see is like a lot more niche communities that kind of like end up drawing people out of the traditional social media, websites, and into those. And so social, like the whole social Web3 space is really, really interesting. I think it's going to have a huge year.
Do you think there's any danger in, take Facebook changing its name to Meta, and obviously that's on their roadmap, but you have this it was read in Web 1, read and write Web 2, read, what, write, and own in Web 3. Is there any risk of, if Web 2 tries to get its hands in Web 3, that could not be a good thing?
Yes and no. I think it's more of an information risk or a marketing risk. Facebook did a tremendous job at accelerating the Web3 movement by changing its name to Meta. It validated it in just a way that, they're basically saying that Web3 is the future and they want to be part of it. And so that got so much attention from institutional investors. All the big tech employees started paying attention to it. But like Facebook and Meta can never really be a true Web3 company because they're a public company, with, Mark Zuckerberg controls more than 50% of the voting there. And so I think, ultimately, the community will decide. But I think what people should realize is that, this is a power move. This is a defensive mechanism that Facebook's doing here. It's seeing the future, and that they're, the next big thing is being created, and they're trying as soon as possible to get in. I think what they'll end up doing, they'll do some stuff with payments, but ultimately what they're trying to create is really like I don't know if you guys remember the game Second Life. I think it came out in like 2003. Everyone was excited about it. It's kind of like an early metaverse, but they're going to try to create like this virtual reality world. But I think the metaverse really is not going to be that, at least for the next 5 years or so. To me, the metaverse is effectively like your digital presence really carries your reputation. And we've seen a long trend, specifically in Instagram influencers and people like seeing their Twitter profiles more valuable than their resume, or their blog more valuable than their resume. We've seen this a long trend where your digital identity is getting more and more valuable to your career, to your reputation. And the metaverse is that's what it is. It's where, your online wallet, maybe your social status is kind of determined by your wallet, or your, all that is kind of wrapped up into that. So I think it won't always look like this virtual reality world. It's really just about, your digital self.
Josh, I think it's really interesting what you were just saying there with regard to reputation, because earlier in 2021, we saw a handful of celebrities or musicians or that type of thing take advantage, I guess, of NFT. And, when everything was selling out on Nifty Gateway on every drop in a matter of seconds and that type of thing. And there were a few, like a very small percentage, that are kind of still around the community and that type of thing. But most, they did their NFT drop, they probably got their cash and that kind of thing. But it almost sounds like what you're saying is that actually may come around to bite them, because reputation is going to be so important when it comes to Web3.
Yeah. Definitely. I think, there's so much speculation still specifically around NFTs. And there's no regulation around NFTs specifically. Like tokens, I think, have a much more gray area. Your traditional like crypto tokens around like the regulatory framework, but with NFTs, you're just selling someone literally an image. It's like selling an image on Etsy or something, or eBay, and so it's perfect. There's zero regulation, and so what people kind of figured out is if they could pay these influencers, like you can contact their agents like, oh, I'll do an Instagram listing for $50,000, and then everyone goes crazy and they're like, oh, this is going to be huge, and all this money rushes in. It was just a marketing thing. There's no substance behind it. I think people are starting to get smarter around that. There's always people looking for quick money, but I think the reputation is going to be important, kind of in a different way. It's going to be less about like maybe what you did wrong, but more about like what contributions you made. And so I talked a little bit earlier about some of these opportunities to get involved in the community and earn tokens. And, maybe you went to a charity event and they give you an NFT, and it's like, you only get that NFT if you contributed something to a donation, to a nonprofit or something like that. That's kind of how I see it will be used. Or maybe, universities start giving you a degree as an NFT and it's in your wallet too. I don't know. But
it's like these POAPs we were talking about on one of our other episodes, right? And it's these, proof of attendance and, a way to sort of show your badge of I was there, I participated, I did this thing, whatever it is, and that a way to sort of earn that clout or that reputation.
Yeah. I mean, I think what, we've ultimately what this ends up being is it's gonna really help, I could see us going into, in the US here, we have a credit score system when people are applying for loans. Effectively, someday when you go get a loan, they're going to look at your wallet and be like, oh, what projects have you worked on? Maybe they even see your income. I don't know, but like we'll see more and more like social validation through your wallet.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Well, Josh, this has been such a good conversation. For a while, Alf and I have been talking about, we've had some guests talk a little bit about Web3, but just this whole deep dive, most of the conversation around Web3, I think is just such an important, so many people like Alf asked earlier in the conversation, I mean, what does Web3 mean? And it sounds like, it is a different definition depending on who you ask a little bit, but we're all kind of navigating this space. But before we let you go, we like to ask every guest that we have on Show Me the Crypto the same 3 questions. And it's a segment we call You Had Me at Crypto. So Alf's going to ask you those.
Sure.
All right, Josh, you ready?
Yep.
Okay. The first question, who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Oh, man. I love following someone like Nader he's at Graph Protocol. He's a developer in the space, started Developer DAO. He's got a lot of great content out there.
Nice. All right. Second question. What will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
Oh, man. 250K plus.
All right. That's on the lower end of the predictions we normally get. But
yes,
fair enough.
It is.
All right. Third question. What is the most underrated coin or project in crypto?
Other than Ankr.
I do feel like Ankr is undervalued, but of course I have to say that. Undervalued. Okay, so I know you guys mentioned Michael earlier. I think Phantom is, I'll say this, is the most undervalued layer 1 in the space right now in particular. And their coin has been pumping a little bit, or the token has been pumping quite a bit recently. And Phantom has incredible, I see the stats because I see, who's building on Ankr, who's building on Phantom on Ankr. And it really has a solid developer ecosystem. But they don't have as much institutional money as like Solana does. So I feel like it's kind of like off the radar. And they're also not listed on Coinbase yet. But Phantom is one to watch. Great ecosystem, great community. Foundation's done a great job of putting the name out there, and love what they're doing. And they have great technology too.
Awesome. Great job with those. Well, Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to join Alf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Great. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.